this single mistake can ruin your entire freight broker business before you even book your first load. I've seen countless of beginners work hard only to lose everything because they fell for it. So in this video, I'm going to show you the exact trap that holds freight brokers back and then the warning signs to catch it early. I'd say the simple adjustment that keeps your business safe and the full startup blueprint that I use to build a recession-proof freight brokerage from scratch. So if you're watching this video in 2026, you missed the party, okay? The gold rush of 2021 is over, meaning the days where you could just buy a laptop, post a load, and make $5,000 a week by accident are dead. And honestly, good riddance, because what we have left is the real market, okay? And 90% of brokers who didn't know what they were doing way back then have been flushed out of the system, meaning the board is clear. And if you're willing to work, 2026 is going to be the greatest wealth transfer opportunity I have ever seen. But you can't play by the old rules. If you try to use the 2021 tactics or early 2000s tactics in this market, you will go broke in 90 days. Okay, I've managed over $200 million in freight in my logistics career. But more importantly, our members, people who started as warehouse workers, drivers, stay-at-home parents, and dispatchers, or had no idea what logistics even was, have now booked thousands of loads, okay? They didn't know much or anything about freight brokering, but they knew how to just follow the proper frameworks. But let me be clear, nobody got there by accident. They had to put in the hard work to make it happen. And if you want to work with me and use me as your mentor while you build out your freight brokerage, click the link in the description. I walked away from the corporate world to build my brokerage and these frameworks, and I have the scars to prove it. So I'm going to give you the entire blueprint, the broker operating system that I use to run a recession-proof business. And we aren't going to talk about just manifesting success. We're going to talk about the math, the psychology, negotiation, and war, because basically that's what this is, a war for capacity and a war for customers. And before we make a single call to a shipper, you need to understand the battlefield, because most newbies fail by not understanding why a shipper hires a broker, mistakenly thinking that a broker is just a middleman who buys low and just sells high, which is how a scalper thinks, rather than an insurer of certainty, okay? And to understand this, consider the travel agent metaphor and think about it this way. So if you're flying to Disney World, okay, you can book the ticket yourself on Expedia very easily, okay? But what if you're a shipper and you had to move 45,000 pounds of steel pipes from Ohio to Texas, and those pipes had to be there by 8 a.m. on Tuesday, or a construction crew costing $10,000 an hour would be standing around doing nothing. Furthermore, what if the truck breaks down in Arkansas that you booked, and then the driver gets arrested or the load gets stolen, okay? The shipper, the guy making the pipes, doesn't want to deal with that because he makes the pipes, okay? That's his job, okay? He doesn't know how to vet drivers and doesn't understand their safety ratings and doesn't know what non-recourse factoring is. You might not either right now, but you will. And the shipper pays you a premium not to move the freight, but to take the pain away, okay? Regarding the 2026 market state, here's what's happening right now, okay? For the last 2 years, we saw a freight recession with too many trucks, not enough freight, causing rates to crash. But now the cycle has flipped, causing weak trucking companies to go bankrupt and weak brokers to quit while manufacturing is returning to North America. And this means capacity is tightening. And when capacity gets tight, shippers panic because they can't find trucks, which is the moment you walk in, okay? I want to spend a very brief moment refuting the market is bad myth, because you will hear people say, oh, the market's down, don't start now. You want to start when the market is hard, because if you start when it's easy, you're going to learn bad habits. But if you start in the mud, you build muscles, and the brokers who are building today will own the next decade. Okay, so let's get tactical regarding who you are going to call, because 99% of new brokers make the same fatal mistake where they open Google and they type in manufacturers, they see big names like Coca-Cola or Walmart, and then they simply ask if they have any freight, which leads to an immediate hang up or no one answering at all, because there's 5 people up until you need to actually talk to the person you have to talk to. And to avoid the failure state, listen to me very clearly. You're not going to move a load for Coca-Cola today or even next year because they have contracts with the biggest logistics companies out there. They have 500 brokers on a waiting list and pay terrible rates due to their leverage. And that is the red ocean, where the water is bloody because everyone is fighting for the same scrap of meat. Instead, we want the blue ocean, meaning customers who are too small for giants like C.H. Robinson, or too complex for the dial for dollars crowd, and high consequence shippers who pay for speed. And this brings us to the heavy hitter rule. So if it fits in a dry van, like toilet paper or water or cereal, it is a commodity that anyone can move, resulting in a measly like $50 or maybe $100 profit margin that is difficult to build a business on. You need to find heavy hitter freight that might be heavy, wide. It maybe needs to be tarped, okay? Stains the trailer possibly, or hopefully not, or goes to active job sites rather than warehouses. If you need the math proof, let's look at the numbers, okay? In scenario A, with a dry van load of water, you might bill $1,200 and pay a truck $1,100, leaving you with a $100 profit, meaning you need to move 100 loads just to make $10,000 a month, which is a nightmare, okay? Contrast that to scenario B involving flatbed or heavy hitter freight like steel coils, where the rate is $2,500 and the truck costs $21,000, leaving you a $400 profit, okay? This means to make that same $10,000, you only need 25 loads, okay? So we are chasing the steel, lumber, and machinery because it is 1/4 of the work for the same amount of money. So how do we find those heavy hitter customers without buying a lead list, which you should never do, by the way, because those leads are sold to 10,000 other brokers containing dead numbers and are essentially trash, okay? Instead, we use the satellite recon method, a proprietary method that I developed to find distressed shippers by looking for visual proof of pain before ever dialing the phone. So step one is the geographic filter, where you pick a secondary industrial market like Tulsa or Gary or Birmingham or Cleveland, places that actually make things rather than oversaturated hubs like Chicago or Dallas. Step two is using my eye in the sky method by going to Google Maps, switching to satellite view, and zooming in on industrial parks near the interstate to scan for outdoor storage rather than just buildings, okay? You are looking for specific shapes like white rectangles, usually indicating lumber wrapped in plastic, or gray cylinders, which are steel coils, or yellow shapes, which represent heavy machinery like Cat or John Deere, and then like messy piles, which indicate scrap metal. For step three, we look for the pain indicators by zooming in closer on the map to become a detective, okay? You need to check if the yard is paved with perfect asphalt, which suggests a rich company, or if it's dirt or gravel, which might be kind of a bingo moment because you are specifically looking for a crowded, messy yard with trucks parked at weird angles and material stacked everywhere because that is money. A messy yard implies a logistics bottleneck where trucks hate going, drivers might want to charge more, and the shipping manager is stressing out of his mind. This leads to step 4, which is the street view verification, where you drop the pin on the street in front of the gate to verify the sign and the types of trucks leaving. Seeing flatbeds or step decks gives you a lead based on information asymmetry, meaning you know more about them, like their tight yard and secondary market location, than they know about you. When I call this guy, I'm not going to sound like a telemarketer asking for freight, but rather an operator who says, hey, I was looking at your facility on the satellite map in Tulsa, and I noticed that the yard looks pretty tight for the volume of steel that you guys are pushing. So I specialize in getting drivers into those congested yards, okay? And that earns the respect of these shippers. So we have our target. Before you pick up the phone, we need to fix your brain because most of you, if you've ever been in sales, have been trained to sell with like super high energy, okay? So if you call a busy shipping manager acting like a used car salesman, he will hang up on you because he has real problems like a broken truck or a missing driver and no time to fake happiness, okay? Instead, we use the anti-sales framework, which is based on the idea that people want what they can't have, so we don't chase or sound hungry, but rather we attract and kind of sound bored, okay? Regarding the tone of voice, I want you to lower your pitch and speak 20% slower, so you sound like a peer sitting in a truck offering solutions rather than like a servant in a call center asking for favors. And this helps you overcome the biggest psychological hurdle using the backup generator concept, which addresses the common objection, we already have a broker, okay? You have to realize that if they didn't have a broker, they wouldn't be a prospect. So when they say that, you validate them by agreeing, and then you pivot to the backup strategy where you position yourself not as like their primary broker, but as like a spare tire, okay? You don't care if the spare tire sits in the trunk for like 6 months, because when that main tire blows out at midnight, meaning the main broker they use gets sick or greedy or just messes up or has horrible communication over time, you then become the most valuable thing in the world. The math of the spare tire shows that if you get 50 companies to accept you as a backup, you won't make money today, but when chaos inevitably strikes next week and they call you, you perform and become the starter, effectively stealing accounts away from their main brokers by waiting for the lock to break rather than kicking the door down. Okay, we're almost ready to make our first call, but since you wouldn't go into a war zone with like a stick or a bat, you need to understand that in freight, your rifle is your tech stack. And I'm not going to tell you to buy expensive software because burn rate is your enemy at $0 in revenue when you first start. But you can't do this for free. So here's the lean operator stack for 2026, which is the bare minimum that you need to look professional and execute safely on a monthly basis. So let's break down the lean operator stack, starting with item 1. So the load board, which is the carrier marketplace, this is where trucks are. And if you don't have this, you are basically blind because you can't see rates or trucks. And while the cost is around $150 per month, my professional tip here is don't buy this until you find traction with a shipper, okay? You need the version basically that shows a 30-day history of any load board that you choose of rates, because if you guess or you try to use ChatGPT or Gemini for rates, then you'll die, okay? They don't have access to accurate load rates that you need. However, in our online mentorship group, I'll just provide you with rates for free until you need to actually book a load, meaning you don't need to waste money on a load board subscription just for giving rates back to shippers that you might not win. Item number 2 is the vetting tool, which is basically your shield, which is a non-negotiable because while load boards have some safety features, they aren't enough. They are essentially a database where brokers report bad guys that they have bad experiences with. And if a carrier stole a load, let's say in 2024, it's going to be shown on this tool rather than the official FMCSA government website. And while the cost is like $50 to $100 per month, if you think that's too much, just wait until you lose a $50,000 load of copper to a scammer. Okay, it's the cheapest insurance you will ever buy. And again, like you can hold off on this until you're actually awarded your first load from a shipper. And I'm also more than happy to personally walk you through your first load when you get to that point. And I'm also more than happy to help you vet carriers up until you actually have to get the vetting tool yourself, so you don't have to pay for it right off the bat. Item number 3 is the TMS, which is like the brain of your business, or your transportation management system, which is where you build the load and you generate your paperwork like the PDF rate confirmation and track the invoice. Okay, do not use a whiteboard or a notebook because if you lose a POD, also known as your proof of delivery, you don't get paid. And we just want to keep it simple because you don't need AI integration, okay? Just like the ability to generate a PDF that looks legal, and yes, you can make these manually for free until you actually start making money. So you don't need to spend any money here yet either. The total overhead math when you start booking loads comes down to $150 for the load board, $50 to $100 for your carrier vetting tool, roughly $25 for your TMS, or free, depending on which one you choose, and $30 for your phone, bringing the total fixed cost to about $300 per month, which is covered if you book 2 loads that month. Okay, so that is your rent. So if you move 1 load a month at a $400 margin, you have covered your rent. And everything after load number 1 is profit, making this a low overhead business if you are smart, but you have to respect the tools. And now imagine you have your list of 50 manufacturers in Tulsa. You know they ship steel and you know their yard is a mess. You sit down at your desk, you pick up the phone, and suddenly it weighs 500 pounds. Okay, your heart starts pounding and your palms sweat and you start making excuses like, oh, it's lunchtime. I shouldn't call now. I can't let that ice cream in the freezer get freezer burned. Stop, because this is called call reluctance and it kills more businesses than the economy ever could. You are scared because you think that you are bothering them or that you are a beggar asking for money, but you know that is a lie, okay? You know you're not a beggar, but a problem solver with the solution to their, let's say, communication problem with their current broker and maybe a truck that can save their shipment, okay? Think of yourself as a firefighter holding a hose outside a burning building, okay? You wouldn't be afraid to knock on the door, okay? You would just kick it down. And today, we're gonna learn how to kick that door down by climbing the conversation ladder. So the first person you talk to is never the decision maker, but the receptionist or the gatekeeper whose job, and it is usually a her, is to protect the shipping manager from people like you by smelling out a salesperson, okay? If you sound like one, you just die there. The salesperson approach is how you fail, basically by saying hi, my name is Name with company name. I was wondering if I could please speak to the person in charge of shipping. This results in you being sent into Narnia. They'll remember your name, they'll block you, you will never even hear from them again because I was wondering sounds unsure. Person in charge implies that you don't know who you're calling, and please, believe it or not, it sounds like begging, okay? Instead, use the peer approach, which is how you win, by using assumptive authority with a bored, distracted tone, like you're looking at a clipboard almost, okay? So when the receptionist says, hey, good morning, Midwest Steel, you simply say, hey, is Mike in the back? And let silence be your weapon, okay? This works because you used his first name, which you maybe found on LinkedIn or somewhere on Google or on their website. In the back is industry slang by drivers and friends rather than a salesperson asking for the shipping department. And by not introducing yourself, you imply that you're already a friend or a regular contact. So if she challenges you by saying, may I ask who's calling? You just use the counter move and say, yeah, it's Name with company name. Just tell them it's regarding the truck for next week. Spoken casually, like a boring administrative task. And that isn't a lie because you do want to talk about trucks, but to her, it sounds like an existing appointment, so she puts you through. And that's you then clearing rung 1. When the phone rings and Mike picks up saying, shipping, this is Mike, he is expecting a fight or a problem or a salesman. So you have 5 seconds to prove you are none of those. Okay, you need a pattern interrupt because if you say, hey, how are you today? Or we are a logistics company, his autopilot will reject you, okay? Instead, use the anti-sales script where you dissect the tonality by saying, hey, Mike, this is Name with company name. Listen, I'm not calling to ask for loads today, so you can totally relax and actually chuckle a little bit to break the tension. It's all about how you say it. Now let's analyze the interaction from there. When you say, I'm not calling to ask you for loads, you immediately remove the threat, causing his blood pressure to drop, and by adding, so you can relax, but followed by a small chuckle, you command the situation, positioning yourself as the alpha in the conversation. And then comes the pause. Okay, you wait, let him say, okay, or what's up, before delivering your hook. Okay, I was actually looking at your facility on the satellite map in Tulsa, proving you have eyes on his building via the satellite recon method from earlier. And then you say, I noticed that yard looks pretty tight for the volume of flatbeds you guys are pushing. I specialize in moving steel out of congested facilities without racking up detention fees. And next, you build the bridge by saying, I know you probably have a primary guy that you love. I'm not trying to wreck that marriage, but I have a couple trucks that run empty through Tulsa on Tuesdays. I just want to see if I could be your backup plan in case your main guy falls off. And asking, is that crazy, is a Chris Voss negotiation tactic from Never Split the Difference, because people hate saying yes, which feels like a commitment, but love saying no, which feels safer to them. And when asking this, you invite a no, like, no, that's not crazy, to which you reply, cool. However, if it were that easy, everyone would be rich, okay? Mike isn't just going to say, sure, okay? But he will throw rocks at you in the form of objections, which are not a no, but a test to see if you crumble. So here are the top 3 objections and exactly how to crush them. First, objection 1, we are customer routed, okay? Which means that their customers arrange the trucks. The rookie mistake is to apologize and hang up, but the professional rebuttal is the pivot, okay? I figured you might be, and that makes your life a lot easier, right? But let me ask you this. When the customer's truck doesn't show up and that steel is sitting on your dock taking up space, do you ever have to scramble to find a truck to get it out of there for them? And when Mike admits, yeah, sometimes, you say, exactly. Okay, I just want to be the guy that you call when their truck fails just to clear your dock. Okay, I don't need the contract. I just want to help you clean up the mess. Objection number 2 is just send me an email, which usually means go away. And instead of asking for the address like a total newbie, use the permission loop, okay? You can say, I can definitely do that, Mike, but look, I send 100 emails a day, and I know you delete all 100 of those emails every day. I don't want to be spam. Just so I know I'm sending something that you'll actually look at. What's the one lane or like the one destination that gives you the most headaches right now? And I'll send you rates for that. And this works a lot of the time because you challenge him and admit that emails are useless and ask for a specific pain point. And if he gives you a lane like Dallas, you have a lead. And objection number 3 is, hey, we're slow right now, meaning he has no freight, allegedly. The professional rebuttal is the future pace, and that is exactly why I'm calling right now. When you're busy, you won't have 30 seconds to talk to me. I just want to get my paperwork set up with you right now, just while it's quiet. So in 3 months, when things do go crazy for you, which you said did, you didn't have to wait on compliance with me, and we can just then rock and roll. Does that make sense? Notice the pattern? Okay, we never argue or get defensive, but agree and pivot back to value using verbal jujitsu. Once you have a good call and send your info, Mike might become a zombie lead. Okay, he's not dead, but just silent. So avoid the valueless check-in call or email and use the value drip via the market intel call. 2 weeks later, say, hey, Mike, it's name. I'm not calling for loads, okay? I just saw that flatbed capacity in Oklahoma is tightening up fast because of that storm system coming through. Rates are jumping about 15% right now. I just wanted to give you a heads up in case you have stuff moving on Friday. You might want to book it today just to save a few bucks. Anyway, I gotta run. Then hang up first. This is a power move because you gave intel, you asked for nothing, and established expertise. Do this every 2 weeks, and eventually, when a crisis hits, he will remember the guy who knew about the storm and then call you, okay? That moment of truth happens when Mike emails, urgent Tulsa load out of Dallas, 45,000 pounds of steel, can you cover this? Now you move from sales to operations. And under the speed rule, you have 5 minutes to respond or the load is gone and might go to someone else. So use the high-low anchor, and instead of just sending a number, like a load quote number, reply with, hey, Mike, I'm on this. Market average is sitting at around $1,000, but trucks are super tight today because of reason. I can get a standard option for, $1,100, might take a few hours to book, or I have a guaranteed option with a driver that I know is empty right now for $1,250. Let me know which way you want to lean. And this gives him a choice and makes you look like a consultant. And if he picks the $1,250 option, you have officially won the customer, but are now short the market. Okay, you sold something that you don't own yet, and your profit depends on the spread, which is the difference between the $1,250 that you sold it for and what you pay the truck. Most brokers fail here by being lazy, but we will treat carrier sales with intensity, okay? You start opening your load board, but instead of posting a boring, invisible load entry like Tulsa, Oklahoma to Dallas, Texas, you need to market the load because you are now an advertiser for all the carriers that are on there. And drivers scrolling through 500 loads a minute need a reason to stop at yours. The clickbait strategy, while sounding dubious, is actually an ethical way to highlight kind of like driver candy, like what drivers want, because you need to emphasize what drivers love. So lightweight to save fuel, no tarp to save work, quick pay, which is like paying them very quickly within a couple days, and fast loading. So a professional post on the load board would look like Tulsa to Dallas, 45K, meaning like 45 pounds, light, no tarp, quick pay, $1,250. And if it requires a tarp, you specify small tarp or like strap to go to minimize the perceived effort. So you put the price in the comments if it is a good rate, but if it is a bad rate, you leave it blank to force them to call you. A related technique is the ghost post, which is a controversial but very common method. So I recommend using this only for lanes that you aren't familiar with yet by posting a ghost load or a test load before you even quote a customer to gauge call volume for when the time comes up. So if your phone blows up at $1,000, the market is pretty loose. But if you get 0 calls, it's tight because data always beats guessing. So when your phone rings and a dispatcher asks, like, how much does it pay? Remember the rule, he who speaks the first number loses. So if you say it immediately, he's going to counter with 1,200. So you want him to anchor the price first. The script goes like this. Hey, good morning. Yeah, the Tulsa going to Dallas. I'm looking to move it today. What are you guys looking to head down there for? And when he says, hey, we need $1,400, well, you now have the high anchor and must use the flinch and pivot, okay? And that's the tactic. So you reply $1,400. Well, man, the target is barely doing $900 on that lane right now, effectively setting a lower anchor to counter his high one. And then you pivot to, I can't get anywhere near $1,400, but look, this is a clean load. It's ready now, and I can get you loaded in an hour. Okay, I can do $1,000 flat, and I'll send the rate con right now, so you don't have to keep calling people. This works because saying ready now sells speed, and send rate con now sells certainty, allowing him to book it and go eat lunch. Okay, and if he refuses, use the takeaway. You know, if you can't do it, no worries. I have another guy on the other line. And if the rate is truly bad, use the destination sell by saying, you know, I know the rate is tight, but this goes to Dallas. You know, Dallas is hot right now, and you'll get a reload out of there instantly for big money, which sells the next load rather than the current ride. So once you agree on, let's say, the $1,000, and the dispatcher says, okay, send it over. You know, my MC number is 123456. Stop. Okay, do not send that rate con to him yet. In 2026, criminal organizations, mostly overseas, pretend to be trucking companies to take your rate con, edit it, and sell it to a real truck for $1,500 in a double brokering scam that leaves you paying the scammer while the real truck never gets paid and sues you. So you must use the vetting protocol, okay, the MFA for trucks. So starting with step 1, which is check the carrier vetting tool for freight guard reports like unauthorized rebrokering or held load hostage and block them if the address is a virtual office in Delaware. So step 2 is the hang up and call back maneuver, where you verify the dispatcher by calling the phone number registered to that MC number on the FMCSA website, which is safer, and asking, hey, I just spoke to a guy named Vlad. Do you have a dispatcher named Vlad? And if they say no, well, you just dodged a bullet. Step 3 is double checking with the driver, okay, where you call the driver's cell phone and ask, hey, what what truck number are you in? Like, what does it say on the outside door? Because if he says he's in a rental, or the MC number is different than what you were given, or is the dispatcher's brother and he has no idea, it's a red flag. Step 4 involves forwarding the dispatcher's email to the main trucking company's email to confirm association. And if the domain differs from the company profile, block them. Okay, if your gut says something is wrong, do not book it, because a lost customer hurts your wallet, but a stolen load hurts your soul and it gets you sued. And even when the carrier is vetted and the rate con is signed, you are not safe, because drivers lie and trucks break, so you become air traffic control, tracking the truck until it is empty. Even when a carrier is vetted and the rate con is signed, you are not safe, because drivers lie and trucks break. Just a heads up, there's a lot of really good drivers. There's also a lot of really bad drivers. So you become air traffic control, tracking the truck until it's empty. Follow up with the loaded call to get a picture of the BOL, otherwise known as your bill of lading, to prove that he picked up the freight, and do a daily morning check at 8 a.m. for multi-day trips, just to ensure everything is good. And if a fall off happens where the driver cancels at the last minute, you are in crisis mode. So do not call the customer yet. Instead, go back to DAT or truck stop, post the load again immediately, and call the drivers who quoted you earlier to find a solution first. Only then do you use the script for bad news. Hey Mike, bad news, the truck spun a bearing on the way in. He's down, but I have a recovery about 45 miles out that I'm working on securing right now. I just wanted to let you know that there might be a 2-hour delay, but I'm fixing it. Mike, he might curse internally or loudly and say, dang it, but he will likely say, okay, just get it here, because customers don't fire you for problems, they fire you for hiding them. And once the load is delivered and the BOL is signed, you have a pile of paperwork with an invoice from the trucker for $1,000 and an invoice to the customer for $1,250. So you made $250 profit on paper, but if you mess up the accounting or cash flow, you are about to suffocate. So here is the dirty secret of logistics that nobody tells you, which is called the float. The math of death dictates that while the truck driver demands to be paid quickly, usually in 2 days via quick pay, or 21 days, which is kind of like a standard thing that you actually preferably should be doing for your credit rating, whole nother video, the shipper, okay, your customer, will often pay slowly, which is, I'd say, a net 30 or a net 45 term, with some, I'd say, larger companies like AB, InBev, or Heinz. They take 90 to 100 days to pay out. So in a scenario where you crush it and move 10 loads a week, incurring $10,000 in truck pay weekly, well, by week 4, you owe truckers $40,000 before the first customer check even arrives. And if you don't have that cash, well, you get reported by them and you lose your bond and you face game over. And this is called growing yourself out of business. And unless you are sitting on a trust fund, you need to bridge that gap called a factoring company, which acts as a bank for freight brokers. So the factor buys your invoice for $1,250, pays you immediately minus a small fee, typically 2 to 3%, and waits for the customer to pay, effectively trading time for money. So, however, you must avoid the recourse trap, because with recourse factoring, while cheaper, if your customer goes bankrupt, well, the factor takes the money back from you, potentially bankrupting you. And instead, follow the rule for new freight brokers and choose non-recourse factoring, which acts like credit insurance, where the factor eats the loss if the customer becomes insolvent. So just pay the extra 1% to sleep at night. Okay, don't risk it. And when choosing a factor, read the NOA, which is called the Notice of Assignment, and check the release clause to avoid massive exit fees. So just use ChatGPT to scan the fine print and just make sure that they integrate with your TMS so you aren't manually typing invoices unless they offer it on their own platform, which they likely do. Before moving a load, you have to ask, can this shipper pay? Because a big building doesn't mean cash flow, okay? So you have to use your factoring portal to get a green light along with your carrier vetting tool. So your factoring company, they buy the invoice from you. That's kind of like the term for it. Or they red light the shipper, like meaning they won't provide you any cash to pay out your drivers for this shipper. If you get a red light for that shipper, like the factoring company just doesn't want to work with them because they have 100 days to pay on average, don't take the risk yourself, okay? Instead, have the hard conversation using a script where you basically blame a nameless finance department for kicking back the credit approval and offer to move the load via credit card or ACH upon delivery with the shipper. And this works because it isn't personal. You aren't saying no, and if they refuse to pay via card, well, you just dodged a bullet. So once your money is now safe, you then look at your business and think, okay, anything that isn't sales is $15 an hour work. So we follow the rule of 10. When you consistently hit 10 loads per week, like making about $8,000 in monthly gross profit, make your first hire a time cleaner, usually a virtual assistant or an operations rep for $800 to $1,200 a month maybe, to handle admin tasks like building loads and check calls, buying you back 4 hours to make 50 more calls for the day, okay? Your second hire, once you reach, let's say, 30 loads a week, should be a US-based junior agent to handle your C-list accounts while you focus on the whales. So as you grow, consider the agent model where instead of W-2 employees and paying a salary, you actually hire agents who keep 60 to 70% of the profit while you provide the authority and capital, creating ultimate leverage with zero payroll risk. But hear me out. None of these sales tactics work if a shipper looks up your MC number and sees a total newbie setup. Shippers can smell a cheap brokerage from a mile away. And if your bond or your insurance and your entity aren't structured the way that big logistics companies do it, well, shippers will totally ignore you. And I'm going to show you how to set up your authority so you look like a 10-year veteran on your very first day. So click here to get the step-by-step professional setup.